Hello, welcome to this intro to Adobe Creative Cloud. My name is Dan Rodney and I've been using Adobe software for over 20 years and teaching it for a very long time. Today I'm going to give you an introduction to what the Creative Cloud is, the various apps that are in it. So a couple things. This presentation, there's a link to this in the video description down below on our YouTube video. This presentation link will stay up so you can reference it in the future. When you want to go through these slides here, you can use your arrow keys on your keyboard, or if you're on a touch screen, you can also swipe between them as well. And what we're going to be covering today is how to get Creative Cloud, choosing the right plan, and the costs that are involved. There might be some plans that you're not familiar with, so we want to go over to make sure you get the right plan. What you get included in it. There's a bunch of features and benefits that are in there, and not everybody realizes all the things that are included. They just think it's the apps and there's other things. Going over what the various apps do and different ways that you can go about learning the software and things that are in the Creative Cloud. Again, my name is Dan Rodney. I'm an instructor and course developer at Noble Desktop. We're a training center based in New York City. We've been around for over 30 years and teach Adobe software as well as things like coding to create websites, apps, and so forth. So the Creative Cloud is certainly a lot of the apps that we teach. We teach pretty much all of the Creative Cloud apps that are included. So how do we go about getting the Creative Cloud? Well, you do have to choose the right plan, and that's going to be based on what your needs are. There's a variety of different plans. For example, there's the All Apps plan. This is what most people think of traditionally, that you just get all the apps that are included: Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign, Premiere Pro, After Effects. So you get all the different Adobe apps, Audition, but they have smaller plans too. Not everybody needs all of those apps. So for example, for photographers, you don't necessarily need all of those apps. You can get a smaller photography plan. If I click these links, anything that has the colored text there, those are links that you can click and can pop it open in a new window. I'm going to turn the webcam off there so we can focus on what you're seeing on screen here. With the photography plan, this is oriented to photographers specifically, and it depends on which apps you need. There are two apps in here. There's Lightroom and Photoshop. So if you need Lightroom and Photoshop, you can get that. If you just want Lightroom, you can get one just for that. Now, there are two different versions of Lightroom. There's Lightroom and Lightroom Classic. It used to be called just simply Lightroom. They renamed that app. They renamed that Lightroom Classic so that they could take the new app and simply call it Lightroom. So a lot of photographers, at least the ones that I know, typically go with Lightroom Classic because they want their photos stored on their computer. Lightroom requires everything to be stored online, which does certainly have its advantages, but it does mean that you have to store everything in your Creative Cloud storage. So you can get a 1 terabyte plan here with just Lightroom, just the online version of it, not the Lightroom Classic, which allows you to store your photos locally. If you want both Lightroom and Photoshop and you want the Lightroom Classic, you can get that for $10 a month. And so you can get that for if you want both of them. All right, so yeah, so it depends on which plan you need. And actually, this little button here doesn't seem to be working properly. Let me reload the page here. See, because I'm pretty sure that the default of that, yeah, it's being a little glitchy here. The default is, if I remember right, is 20 gigs. So you get that, a little bit less storage, but you get both apps. Well, you actually get all three apps. You get Lightroom Classic, you get the regular Lightroom, you also get Photoshop. So this one gives you kind of the most, but if you want to get the 1 terabyte, which is more storage, I think it ups the price a little bit per month since the website's not working here. I don't know what that price is off the top of my head. If you want that additional storage, but you don't need the Photoshop, then you can just get the online version of Lightroom. But basically, photographers don't need all of that stuff. So if you don't need all the apps, you can just get either just Lightroom or Lightroom and Photoshop. We'll talk more about those differences a little bit later and what exactly Lightroom does. You can also get an individual app. So instead of getting all of the apps or just a few photography apps, you could just get one. Let's say you just need Adobe XD. You could just get that one individual one. That's going to be a kind of cheap a la carte way. Now, as soon as you start to put multiple apps together, by the time you get to like 3 apps, pretty much you're just going to want the all apps plan because the cost is going to add up to that same price. But if you just need 1 or 2 apps, you can get away with just subscribing to those individual apps. If you want to see all the Creative Cloud pricing, you can click this link. This will take you to the part where you can look at any specific area, and you can look over here on the left, like if you're into illustration, you've got Illustrator. If you're looking at video apps, you've got Premiere, After Effects, Adobe Audition. So you can look at the plans that you're looking for specifically and get the pricing, which will vary. These are all US prices. So if you're coming from somewhere outside the US, your pricing might be different outside the United States. One thing to know is that when you get your Creative Cloud plan, that you can log into 2 computers at the same time. So when you get the Creative Cloud, you're going to get a desktop app where you can install all of your apps locally on your Mac or PC. You can install those apps on as many computers as you want. Let's say you have 3 computers. You have one at work, one at home, and one laptop. 3 different computers. You can install the apps on all of them, but you can only be signed in at a time to 2 of those. And it can be different platforms. One could be a Mac, one could be a PC. That's not a problem. But the idea is that let's say you have a laptop and like a work computer. Well, if you leave work, you can still use your laptop when you're at home, or your home computer, and you can still be signed in at work. They don't make you sign out every single time. It's meant to be that you are one person just in different places on different computers, so you can install it on as many as you want. When you get to that 3rd computer, when you go to sign in, it's going to say, hey, you're already signed in on 2 other computers. Do you want to log out? And it shows you the 2 computers, and you can choose which one you want to sign out of. It just signs you out. You can always come back to that computer. Your apps are still there. You just have to sign in again to get access to things like your cloud storage and stuff. Yeah, you can always sign in and out, but you can be signed in simultaneously on 2 different computers at the same time. So just explained all that stuff there. So what do you get in the Creative Cloud? There's actually quite a lot. It is the apps, and that's what a lot of people think about, but there's a lot more than just the apps. But you do get the apps. So you get things like Photoshop and Illustrator and After Effects, or whatever. If you're getting the whole Creative Cloud plan, you're getting all the apps. Or if you subscribe to just certain ones, then you'll just get those apps that you are choosing to get. It's important to understand that these are not web apps. They are locally installed apps. They are on your Mac or PC. You don't go to a web browser to use them. They are apps that you install. Once they're installed, you can sign into your account to get things like cloud files. But if you're saving files locally, you don't have to use their cloud storage. You can just save files locally. It depends on the app as to if there's additional features for some of their cloud files. There can certainly be like collaboration reasons why you want to use their cloud documents in certain apps. But these are not web apps, even though they do use internet connected features for quite a few of the apps. The way that you get them is using the Creative Cloud desktop app. Once you have that app downloaded, installed, which you can get from this link, you can click on that to go and download the Creative Cloud desktop app. That app is what you launch. And let me just bring that on screen here. So that was on my second screen there. So on the Mac, it lives up here in your toolbar up here at the top. On Windows, there'll be on the bottom right, you have your little icons, and you can go in there, or you can just go into your applications and launch the application that way as well. So you have got different things. You got your files, you got your apps, and initially, once you first download it, you're going to have to install the apps. So you would go over here to the Apps tab, go to All Apps, or a specific kind of type of app that you're looking for. They'll kind of tell you what might be used. But if you're in the All Apps thing, you would have to install your apps. Now, I've already installed these, but if I scroll down, we'll see there are additional ones that I can install. And then it will download, it will install it, it'll live on my computer. And this app just runs in the background to do things like app updates, file syncing, activating fonts, and a variety of different features. There are also mobile apps that you can get as well. So there is, for example, an iPad version of Photoshop, and there is an iPad version of Illustrator. They are newer apps. They don't have all of the features that the desktop equivalents have. The desktop apps are the full-fledged, fully capable apps that have the most features. But over time, I kind of think that the iPad or Android tablet, if they are available for Android as well. I don't have a tablet, so I haven't used the tablet versions of it. Those are just going to become better and better over the years as they continue to be developed. They're newer, so they didn't have to launch with every feature, but I'm sure over the years they will just continue to get more and more powerful to the point where maybe it'll be able to do everything that the desktop apps can do. I think that's just a matter of time. So you get your desktop app, you install the apps locally, and then you can launch them and use them. You do not always need an internet connection to use those. And if you want to get a mobile app for, let's say, a tablet or something, you can go get that. You can use the links that are in the desktop app, or you just go over to your app store and download the app that way. If you have used the Creative Suite in the past, that used to be, actually, before even the Creative Suite, it was just separate apps. You just had Photoshop, you had Illustrator. Then eventually they created what was called the Creative Suite, which was Adobe CS versions. And that was just a way to package all the software together, sell it at a discounted price so you could get all of the apps that you needed as kind of a suite. They started releasing them all at the same time instead of at different random times. Well, eventually they discontinued the Creative Suite in favor of the Creative Cloud. And the Creative Cloud is just the newer versions of those apps. So if you have used a Creative Suite app, this is just the next version of that. Many versions ahead because they've been releasing a lot of new features throughout the Creative Cloud, but it's just the continuation of the Creative Suite, just with a name change and a change in the pricing, the way that you get it. So as far as features go, you get the apps, but there's other stuff that you get in addition to the apps. You can get Adobe Fonts. Every Creative Cloud plan, even from the single app plans, includes Adobe Fonts. And there are thousands of fonts. There's a lot of fonts in there. So if I click on this link to go to the Adobe Fonts, that's a little weird. Let me just go to fonts.adobe.com. Not sure why that one prompted me to sign in. Let me go back and click that. Oh, yeah, there we go. That was weird. So when you get in here, let's see. Oh, look, 20,000 fonts. So there's a lot of fonts that are available here. If you look at all fonts, you can start to browse these, look for specific ones. There's a lot of them in here. And some of these are very nice, high quality ones. Some are free fonts that you can also find on something like Google Fonts. If you know fonts.google.com, there are free open source fonts that are on here. There is some overlap between free Google Fonts and the paid Adobe fonts, but there's going to be a lot of fonts on here that are not available, potentially not available anywhere else, that you can only find here. And all of these are licensed for commercial use, and you can activate those, and once you activate them, they sync back through the Creative Cloud app, and you can then use them in any app on your Mac or PC. It's not just specific to Creative Cloud apps. For example, you could use these fonts in Microsoft Word or in PowerPoint. So you're creating a presentation. You can use Adobe fonts in your presentation. So yeah, it's not just for Adobe apps. They can be used in any app, and professional or personal projects for web, for print, for digital. So you've got a good quality license that you can use these fonts professionally. Separately purchased, these would cost a lot of money if you were getting them just by themselves. And these are just included in your membership. Now, let's say you just want Adobe Fonts. This used to be called Typekit before Adobe purchased it. Then they called it Adobe Typekit. Eventually it was rebranded to Adobe Fonts. And back when it was just Typekit, you could purchase it just by itself. Now, Adobe has expanded the offering. It used to be just for web fonts on a website. You couldn't download fonts or anything to use them on your machine. It was just for launching fonts on a website. That was it. So Adobe's definitely expanded the offering, made it a lot better. It's not just for websites anymore. It's for anything you're doing in Adobe apps or other apps. That's great. The ability to download fonts was a real big improvement that Adobe did. But let's say you just want Adobe Fonts. You're not interested in any app or anything. You're just like, I just want Adobe Fonts. And how would I get that? What's the cheapest? Well, any Creative Cloud plan includes Adobe Fonts. The cheapest Creative Cloud plan is InCopy. Now, you might not care about InCopy. It's a companion app that goes with Adobe InDesign. It's meant for editors. It is the cheapest single app plan. Most of the single app plans cost $10 a month, but InCopy is the one rare one that only costs $5 a month. So cheapest way to do it, and look over here, all plans include Adobe Fonts. It's not like you're getting a subset, you get the full on Adobe Fonts. All of those are included. So that's going to be the cheapest way. And if you're talking about 5 times 12, so that's $60 a year. $60 a year, and you get all the Adobe Fonts. You don't even ever have to install InCopy. You could just purchase it just so you get the Adobe Fonts. And that's pretty close to the price that it was back when it was Typekit, just as an just a standalone thing. I think it was like $50 a year, but it was only for websites, and that was it. So that you also get the ability to download those fonts to your computer. So you can get that just by itself if you want. In addition to Adobe Fonts, you also get what is called Adobe Portfolio. Creative professionals need a portfolio website. You could pay separately for hosting, but you actually get web hosting included as part of your Creative Cloud plan. It's web hosting for your portfolio. It's called Adobe Portfolio, so the name is appropriate. And this gives you hosting and as many pages as you want on the website. It's for creative professionals. There are different templates that you can use. You put your work into it, and you've got a portfolio website with no additional hosting costs. Now, if you want your own domain name, that will be something you have to purchase separately, because domain names cost money. They're normally, you can get them from other places. So if you already have a domain name, you can just point it at your Adobe Portfolio site. If you don't pay for a domain name, you can still get a domain name on the portfolio.adobe.com. It would just, you wouldn't have your own custom domain name. So you don't have to purchase a custom domain name for your website, but you can if you want to. That would be an additional cost, but domain names are like $10 to $20 a year. Not a month, per year, like $10 to $20. So they're not very expensive. It would be a cheap add-on, and there's no monthly hosting costs, because the web hosting itself, if you were going to get web hosting separately, that's normally a monthly cost of several dollars a month, every single month, that you have to keep paying. So if all you want to do is have a website for your portfolio, this is a no extra cost thing, except if you want your own domain name. So that is a separate purchase. But like I said, it's cheap. You can get it for generally like $10 to $20 a year. If you're a photographer, you can use your Lightroom photos. So within Lightroom, you can put stuff into your Adobe Portfolio. And it also integrates with Behance. Not that you have to integrate with Behance, but you can if you want to. Behance is like a social media platform, kind of like a Facebook or Instagram for designers. And it was... it's a way where people can go, they can post, people can like your posts, and you can integrate Behance and the stuff that you upload to Behance with your Adobe Portfolio. Not required, but is something you can do if that interests you. And I should mention that Behance is owned by Adobe, so the integration makes sense. That was another company that they acquired because they wanted to be able to have a place where there could be social media type stuff for designers and artists in particular. Adobe Stock. Now, with Creative Cloud, that is one offering. Adobe Stock is a separate offering. So I know what we were talking about, what's included. It's also important to know what's not included. Adobe Stock is a collection of photos and videos and music. It is not included with Creative Cloud. It is a separate purchase, a separate subscription, and so that is not something that's included. There are some free things that you can get as a limited, just kind of taste test thing that you can try out some and get used to using Adobe Stock. But that's just a limited thing, that there's some free options. You can click this link to see the free stuff. But if you want Adobe Stock to get stock photos, stock video to use in your material, that will be an additional charge. And it depends on how much of that you need on a monthly basis as to what that cost is. So that's not included. That's an extra charge. Cloud services. When you're using these apps, I said before that these apps are installed locally on your machine. You get Creative Cloud storage as part of your plan. And even though most of those apps can save locally, some of them can also save to the cloud, and some of them will have additional features if you save to the cloud. For example, Google Docs. Google Docs wouldn't work the way that it works in terms of collaboration, that all the people can work at the same time, if it were a local file. Google Docs have to live online. They have to be always connected, living on Google servers, so that everybody can collaborate and share the file all at the same time. So certain features within Adobe Apps have to be cloud features for things like collaboration. So there's a couple ways that the Creative Cloud storage works. There is Creative Cloud storage that works similarly to Dropbox or Google Drive, and that's just a place that you can put any files that you want. But separately from that, then there are cloud documents. Now, cloud documents, like Adobe XD has, those are files that live in the cloud. They're not like a file that you see locally on your machine, synced like Dropbox. They are a kind of fully cloud document. So there's kind of those two views, the local kind of synced documents like Dropbox versus the cloud documents, which are separate. Those all use your Creative Cloud storage. Additionally, other internet connected things like Creative Cloud libraries, these are also stored in your Creative Cloud storage, and they're going to allow you to share assets, so colors and styles and graphics, across Creative Cloud apps. A lot of Creative Cloud apps have access to Creative Cloud libraries, and that's a way to move things across apps through those libraries. And they're cloud libraries, so they also sync across computers. It's not just about going across apps, it's also across all your computers as well. So you'll have that same library on your laptop and your home and your desktop at work. All of those computers would share that same Creative Cloud library. And they can also be shared with other people too. So since you can share it with other people, that of course has to also live online so that not only you can get it, but they can get it, and you're not doing file shuffling. You just share a link, they have access to it, updates get made over the internet, so you don't have to worry about managing files. So your Creative Cloud libraries, your fonts, all that sort of stuff, that takes place within your Creative Cloud account. And that's why when you sign in to a computer, you're signing in with your account so that it knows which fonts you want. So if you sign into a new computer, it will let you install those apps that you want on that computer, and that's up to you which ones you want to install. You know, maybe your home computer isn't very good, so it's not so good with video apps. So maybe you don't install the video apps. Maybe you just do that on your work computer. But your fonts are going to be available and synced across all of those devices. So in your account, you get to choose, okay, these are the fonts I want. All your computers are going to have access to all of those fonts. So a lot of that stuff gets kind of associated with your account, and that's why you sign into your account across computers. So let's break down what each of these Creative Cloud apps do, starting with Photoshop. It's the industry standard photo editing and also design software. Even though it's called Photoshop and its first and foremost reason to exist is photo editing, it's a pixel-based program. So there are a lot of pixel-based graphics that we need to create. So it's also a design app too. It's very versatile. You can use it across tons of different industries: web, print, video, photography. It's like the Swiss Army knife of design and photography apps. You can work with photos, you can retouch, you can color correct, composite, put multiple photos together. You can do tons of stuff. So many different things you can do with it. You can create designs for social media, websites, print, video. It's common to take a graphic, design it, take it into After Effects, animate it. You can do that. You can also animate within Photoshop itself. Now, the animations are very simple, and if you want to create an animated GIF, which is really the best way to create animations for email marketing. So if you're creating emails with animations, and also social media too, although social media can take video, not just animated GIFs. But animated GIFs, you can build them in Photoshop. You can create the graphics, animate them, and we teach you how to do that in our Photoshop Animated GIFs class. So, yeah, and I'll be showing you some examples of this. First, I'll introduce what they do, and then I'll show you some examples of these things. You can design your graphics and animate them in After Effects. So we teach Photoshop classes. With each of these apps, I'll have a link to our classes where you can learn more for each of these, and you can see depending on what you want to do. We'll have an in-a-day class, which is a 6-hour class to get you started. We also have a longer boot camp, which is in many cases 18 hours. So the in-a-day class, if we have like Photoshop in a day or Illustrator in a day or InDesign in a day, those are the first 6 hours of the boot camp. So if you know you want more training and you want the full 18-hour class, just go for the boot camp. If you just want to get started and get your feet wet with the program, just do a little kind of introduction, get started with the app, you could do the in-a-day. And I know we call it in-a-day, but it's also available at nights. That's kind of our short introductory class to get people started. We still cover quite a bit of stuff in just 6 hours to get you started. We want to be a practical hands-on class to actually get you using the app quickly. So here's some examples, switching back and forth. In this case, there were some little white areas that were kind of distracting. A little leaf down here, wanted to get rid of those. So this is the before and the after, before and the after. Just got rid of those things. So you can remove unwanted elements from photos. We teach you how to do this in both our Photoshop in a Day and Photoshop Bootcamp classes. Adjusting color. So here, before versus after, the original was a little bit reddish, and it wasn't a horrible color, but it was a little bit red. The grays were not neutral grays, and then the after is showing the color correction. You could do color correction, you can do contrast adjustment, brightness, you could do those sort of things, which again, you learn in the Photoshop in a Day and Photoshop Bootcamp classes through Noble Desktop. Then you can also apply special effects through filters. This we teach in the Photoshop Bootcamp, the longer course. So kind of making it look like the car is moving, the wheels kind of like they're spinning, giving them some blur, a radial blur in that case, or a diagonal kind of specific angle blur in the background to make it look like the car is moving. You can also, aside from doing photography stuff, you can do social media graphics. You want to make something like a Facebook post like this and combine logos and text and photos. You want to combine all those things in. You can do that with Photoshop. We teach that in the Photoshop in a Day and Bootcamp classes. Animated GIFs. This is kind of a classic animated GIF where you kind of see one picture, another picture, another picture. Animated GIFs don't have to be kind of picture after picture like this. That is the format behind the scenes, that it kind of goes from one picture to another. But if the transition from one photo to another or one graphic to another doesn't look like it changes much, it can look like things are moving and changing in all sorts of different interesting ways. But this is kind of a simple, just picture by picture frame style animation that you can create with Photoshop. And we teach that in our Photoshop Animated GIFs course. Moving on to Adobe Illustrator. This is the industry standard for drawing vector graphics. So Photoshop is pixel-based graphics, and a pixel is a little square block of information. When you take a picture on your digital camera, or if you were to scan something in, all of that information gets converted into these little square colored blocks. Now you want those pixels to be as small as possible so your eye doesn't see them, or else it's going to look like pixelated kind of square chunkiness. Doesn't look sharp, doesn't look very good. On the other hand, we have vector graphics. Now, vector graphics are these kind of mathematically described lines that are always crisp and clean. You can make them any size you want because they're not based on these little square block pixels. So whenever you draw things like logos and so forth, you want to draw those as vector graphics. So this is where you create logos. You can also create web graphics. You can also create social media graphics here. Fashion designers use Illustrator a lot because they're really good at creating patterns. And packaging designers also like to use Illustrator because Illustrator is a very precise app. So you can be very precise about measuring things, because if you're doing packaging and you want to make sure everything folds right, you got to make sure that everything's measured properly. And packaging also uses patterns a lot, and it does type. So Illustrator is heavily used in those kind of industries and others as well. Just like with Photoshop, you can also design graphics here and take them to animate in After Effects as well. You can take them from Photoshop or Illustrator. And of course, we have Illustrator Classes here, and you can click that link if you want to see more about our Illustrator classes. For example, here are some examples of logos. And in this case, these are what we call responsive logos. In this day and age, we want to make sure that our logos look good across all different screen sizes. So we can simplify our logo as it gets smaller, going from some just small kind of iconic thing that you know what it is. And then as you get bigger, you might add things. Nike doesn't change that much in this case, but something like Coke. Coke is a perfect example of, you can have it be very simple with just Coke. You can make it more complex with Coca-Cola. You can add the swoosh. Then you could add drink and Coke. So, but these would be created in Adobe Illustrator. Create icons. Icons could be useful for logos. They can be useful for apps, websites. Icons are all over the place. Road signs, just signage in general. Illustrator's the graphics that you can create there, you can use them for lots of different purposes. Patterns. This is a very simple pattern. It's very light, very simple for like the background of something. It's meant to be simple because if you're putting content on top of this, there's just this faint little delicate pattern to this. This can be used in websites, in apps, in print, in video, in fashion design, pretty much any kind of design. You can potentially use patterns for that. And Illustrator is good at creating patterns. Packaging. Again, packaging design requires precision and often does also use patterns as well. It also does a lot of typography. And so Illustrator is good at type as well, especially when it comes to breaking apart the type and going in and doing interesting things to kind of customize it, which happens in logos. So Illustrator is used a lot in packaging. Moving on to Adobe InDesign. It's the industry standard for page layout and design. Many years ago, there was an app called Quark Express, and it was heavily used by the entire page layout and print design industry. And along came InDesign, which was a better app, and it completely replaced it, and it has been the standard ever since. It is excellent with typography, especially a lot of type. Illustrator is good with type, but it focuses more on small amounts of type. You're not going to be laying out a book in Illustrator. It doesn't have the features for doing that. InDesign is good at anything from a single page to very long, many-page documents, but it has excellent typography controls, especially across many pages. When you're combining text and graphics and everything together on one or more pages, that's what InDesign is good at. It's good at page layouts. InDesign has features specifically targeted at managing multiple pages. You can technically create different artboards in Photoshop and different artboards in Illustrator, but they're still just kind of a random collection of unrelated artboards. InDesign specifically has features for managing multiple pages, putting common things across those pages, like the title of your book or magazine, like your page number in a consistent place. Automating the placement of the page number that actually numbers the page for you, those kind of things. So InDesign is really the king of long documents, books, magazines, brochures. Now, it's perfectly fine at creating a single page document, but it really excels at long documents. Its primary purpose is used for print, but it also can do some digital stuff. It's really good, for example, at creating PDFs. Whether they're intended for print or not, it's good at creating PDFs. And so we have, of course, InDesign Classes as well that you can check out with that link right there. Taking a look at some examples here. Book covers, for example, are created in InDesign. And anything sort of related to books, magazines, long documents, created in InDesign. Then there's the interiors of books as well. I used to work in a design studio that primarily did a lot of books, did other stuff as well, but did a lot of books. And when I told people that I worked on books and built and designed books, they said, "Oh, you do the jackets, you do the covers?" And I said, "Well, that's one of the things that I do, but I also do all of the pages that come in between too. There's a lot more to books than just what you see on the outside. All of those interior pages, they need to be laid out. The type needs to be designed, the layout needs to be created, the page numbers need to be put on, and so the interiors and exteriors can be designed and built with InDesign." Here's just another example of an interior of a book as well. Magazines. Again, covers of magazines, interior spreads of magazines. You know, the cover is just one page, but all of those dozens and dozens and dozens, tens and tens of pages, hundreds of pages potentially, depending on the magazine, all those pages inside, they need to be designed. So InDesign is the place to do that. Branding as well. Now, the logo itself would probably be created in Illustrator. That would be the best place to make it. But then what about doing the type? You could potentially do some of those things in Illustrator, but InDesign is a great place to combine the stuff you do in Illustrator with excellent type controls. So you can do the various different elements here in InDesign. But like I said, you could also do them in Illustrator. Depends on your personal preference and what your plan is of what you're going to be doing. And then also these things all work together. So if you're doing digital and print and a variety of different ads, social media graphics, really these things are all related. It is a suite of apps that go together. That's why they used to call it Creative Suite. So for example, you might retouch the photo in Photoshop. You might do the logo in Illustrator and then put it all together, bring it all into InDesign to place everything and do the typography and use all of these apps together and use each app for what they're best at doing. Now, a lot of that stuff was mostly static stuff, except for animated GIFs in Photoshop. But moving on to motion graphics and video editing, After Effects is the industry standard for motion graphics, animation, digital compositing. Compositing is putting multiple things together, and different visual effects. Right? It is called After Effects. You can animate designs. So let's say somebody creates something in Photoshop or Illustrator and wants you to animate it. You can bring those into After Effects and animate it. You can animate logos. You can create animated infographics. You can put multiple videos together. You can remove green screen backgrounds, which is called chroma keying. You can add different visual effects to video. So After Effects is a video program, video focused motion graphics. You can combine graphics, video, sound, animation. You can put that all together to create really interesting visual videos. And as I said before, you can take designs that you create somewhere else, or you can create them in After Effects, because After Effects does have some features. Most designers aren't going to be designing in After Effects because they're more familiar with Photoshop or Illustrator. So for a lot of people, the workflow is going to be design in Photoshop or Illustrator. Now, if you know After Effects, you can create some stuff in After Effects. It's not to say you have to use Photoshop or Illustrator, but for a lot of people, if you're an animator working with a designer, that designer, the reason they're hiring you is because they don't know After Effects. So they're likely not going to design in After Effects. They're going to design in what they know. They're going to do that in Photoshop or Illustrator. They'll send you the Photoshop or Illustrator file. You prep it so that it's good for importing into After Effects. Import into After Effects, you animate it. Also Adobe XD, which is a digital design app for doing user interface design, UX, user experience design. You can also say send over to After Effects. And so XD can do some animation built into it, but if you ever kind of hit a limit as to what it can do and you want to do more, you can send that over to After Effects and continue to do stuff. And of course, we teach After Effects as well. Here's an example of something built. This was actually created and put together all in After Effects. Now, the graphics, like the backgrounds and stuff, you could either get them from stock places, you could shoot them yourself. If you need to color correct the stuff, you'd use Photoshop to do that. But once you prep the photos and the backgrounds and stuff, you can bring it in. And this was all kind of composited and put together. The type was added. The logo that's from Illustrator was brought in. And all of this was animated together in After Effects. I'm just going to turn that off here. When you listen to this, you can leave the sound on. I'm just turning it off just in case. I just want to make sure that YouTube doesn't have a problem with sound. It's all copyright-free sound, so they shouldn't have a problem, but you never know if there's some sort of automated part of the system. I want to make sure they don't have any issue. So notice these things kind of come down. So they animate, the smoke kind of comes across. It's like fog. The logo animates up from like a silhouette, so it's a black logo that turns into a white logo here, kind of it's in shadow, and then it's like the smoke kind of comes and illuminates it. The type of guitarpicks.com gets added. The Rockin' Guitar Picks actually was also added in After Effects. So yeah, and actually the colored smoke, that was actually just a video that we shot of just like somebody blowing flour, and we kind of blurred it out to make it look more like smoke or fog instead of the flower, which you could kind of actually see that looked like flour. And then we colorized it in After Effects. So you can put all this kind of stuff together in After Effects and create some cool looking stuff. This is another example of an After Effects video. Now in this example, this is an animated GIF as the final product because this was for use in an email. But this could also be a video as well. But the complexity of this, with all of those little pieces moving, even though you can create simple animated GIFs in Photoshop, this is well beyond the ability of what Photoshop could do for an animated GIF. Photoshop is great at creating simple animated GIFs. And if it's a simple animated GIF, I would say that After Effects is kind of overkill. Photoshop is actually easier to create a simple animated GIF if it's simple. But once it gets more complex and you need more control, then that's where After Effects is going to be easier. So the simple stuff for animated GIFs, I do it in Photoshop. Anything more complex, whether it's a video or animated GIF, I'm going to do those in After Effects. Now, Premiere Pro. After Effects is for doing motion graphics, and it can do video effects and video related things, but it is not a video editing program. Premiere Pro is for editing videos. And when we say video editing, a lot of people just say, I want to do video editing, and they don't really know what it is, and they think After Effects does video editing. Technically, it can edit videos. It can change them and work with them, but when you talk about video editing, what you're really normally meaning is that you're putting different clips together in a certain sequence. You're cutting out the bad parts. You know, you are an editor. You are editing out or weeding out the things that you don't want so you get the parts that you do want. And you might overlay things like logos over top of it, but if you're focusing on the video part of it, you might do some color correction, you might do some green screen removal, but for the most part, video editing is the part of getting rid of the stuff that you don't want, so you wean it down to the stuff that you do want in your videos. And After Effects isn't so great at that stuff. It can do some, but Premiere is the place that's going to excel at editing the videos. And these things integrate with each other. So if you want to create some really cool animation, then you can create that in After Effects, like a really cool animated intro title sequence, and then bring that into your Premiere Pro project, where you do all your edits and get the video in sequence, edit out all the bad parts. And more video is just becoming more popular with social media, advertising, marketing, television, movies. But the growth of online video is just exploding. You look at social media platforms like TikTok, which are 100% video. Now, in the case of TikTok, their whole style of video editing is to not look professional. They want things to kind of look like they're not too polished, because then it almost feels like an ad. But that's just a different style of editing, really. So you can import video, you can import music and sound and voiceover and graphics and put them together into a sequence, and then edit out all the unwanted parts and create a final video. Or you don't even have to have a ton of stuff like that. You could just have maybe some video and some music or sound, and you don't necessarily always have to have graphics and that sort of stuff. You can do as much as you want or as little. When when you're in Premiere Pro, you can do some effects. You can remove green screen backgrounds, but After Effects is better. It is called After Effects. So for video effects, you can do more stuff and have more control in After Effects. So you could do some of that stuff in Premiere, but if you hit the limit of what Premiere is good at, you go over to After Effects for it. Just like Premiere can also do a little bit of audio editing, but it can't do a lot of audio editing. So if you, again, run into limitations where you're trying to remove some background noise and you just can't remove that background noise, you could go over to Adobe Audition. And Adobe Audition is for doing audio editing. So of course we teach Premiere. And here's just an example video. Again, when you're listening to this, you can unmute this for yourself so you can hear the soundtrack that's here. So editing out the parts, there was extra stuff before and after each one of these clips. So choosing the part of the clip that we wanted, putting them into sequence. In this case, we also put some text over top of it. Like so. So this is one of the projects that you learn how to do in our Premiere class. All right, and then also, I forgot to put in a slide here for this, but we do also teach Adobe Audition. Adobe Audition is Adobe's audio editing program. So if you want to edit audio, if you want to create things like podcasts, which are audio specific, if you want to clean out background noise, cut out a part of audio, you could do some of that stuff in After Effects or Premiere. But when you want to do more, when you want to focus on audio, that's Adobe Audition. Now, with Adobe XD, Adobe XD is a digital design tool. It's used for designing UI and UX, user interface or user experience design. It's focused on digital design, websites, apps, any sort of digital experience. It's competing with other apps from companies like Figma and Sketch. Figma, Sketch, and Adobe XD all pretty much do the same type of thing, just made by different companies. So right now, all of these companies are kind of vying for designers to use them. Adobe XD does have a free starter plan. There are limitations that you'll run into, and the paid plans do not have those limitations. So if you're using XD a lot, you will end up needing to get one of the paid plans for it. You can do some animation directly in Adobe XD. The idea is you can design, you can animate, you can prototype, then share with developers all in a single app. But if you do run into a wall, as I said before, and you want to do some interesting animation that just can't be done in XD, there is also an export where you can continue to do more complex stuff, because After Effects is going to be able to do way more than Adobe XD can do. But that's not to say that Adobe XD is bad at animation. It can do some pretty cool stuff. And of course, we teach Adobe XD as well. Here's an example of having two pages within either a website or an app, and kind of building up a little prototype that you can interact with. These prototypes can be useful to show users if you want to do user testing and see if the idea for your website or app or whatever this digital product is, you want to test it out on users, show it to clients, and make sure that the design is going to work well before you actually give it to a developer to actually code into reality, to make that into a final website or to make it into an app. And then Adobe XD, using Adobe servers, using their cloud storage, you can create share links and you can share it with a client. They can write comments and give you feedback. You can share it with developers using a link. And so that's part of why they call it Creative Cloud, because there are these cloud-based collaborations. And when you're working in Adobe XD, there's cloud documents where multiple people can be working on something at the same time, just like you would in Google Docs. And so that all that stuff has to be cloud files that are stored online, that no one person has it on their computer. It's just shared through the internet, just like you would with a Google Doc. Now, going back to Lightroom, I briefly started talking about this Lightroom stuff before. There is Lightroom Classic, which is the original first Lightroom app. It used to be called simply Lightroom. And most pro photographers that I know are using Lightroom Classic because they have tons of photos and they don't want to store all of the stuff online. They want to have local storage on their computer. Now what they call just plain old Lightroom, that is now the newer app. It is a more simplified app, and that requires all of your photos to be stored online in your Creative Cloud storage, which does have its advantages because then you can use it across any of your devices. You just sign in to your Lightroom app and you can get access to all your computers access to all of your photos across all of your computers. There's an advantage to that, as long as you don't have too many to store. So it's really about quantity of photos that you have. The Lightroom Classic works with photos that are stored locally, but you can also sync your photos through to the Lightroom mobile app. So the Lightroom mobile app, if you're using Lightroom Classic, you can still choose, it doesn't just automatically sync everything, but you can choose certain photos to sync. And then you can actually still edit them on the other computer, and your changes will be synced back to your Lightroom Classic the next time you go into your Lightroom Classic. It's just a little different than the way that Lightroom works, because with Lightroom, everything is all online. Your photos are actually stored online, and therefore when you go to any computer, you have access to the full original high-res. Whereas Lightroom Classic, it kind of syncs like a preview. And so when you edit on another computer, you're kind of making those edits, and those edits have to sync back to Lightroom Classic. So it's a little bit of a different kind of workflow though. And Lightroom Classic, it doesn't automatically sync all of those photos, whereas Lightroom does put just everything online. Right now, as it is, Lightroom, just plain old Lightroom, is, or I should say plain new Lightroom, is simpler. It doesn't have as many features as Lightroom Classic. Lightroom Classic has been around for longer, and it's more fully featured. We teach Lightroom Classic here. And I'm curious, as far as the future goes, if the new version of Lightroom will ever kind of reach feature parity and get all of the features of Lightroom Classic, or if they're okay with that being kind of a more simple app. Not to say that it's not capable, it certainly is, but it doesn't have as many features as Lightroom Classic does. So what Lightroom does is, Lightroom is, it's a companion. Think of it as a companion for photographers. It's going to let you organize your photo library. So it's designed for people that are going out and shooting, photographers, videographers, or people that are going out and shooting, photographers, videographers. You're shooting your stuff on your camera, downloading it, and this also even works with mobile phones. You can have your mobile phone upload your photos to Lightroom as well. And but you organize, you download. Let's say you plug in your card, or you plug in your camera, download. So there's an import button that you click import. You import your photos. In the case of Lightroom Classic, it downloads them to your computer, and you delete the ones you don't want. You rank them, you organize them. You can add keywords for searching later on, and this is organizing your library. It helps you manage your photos. You can put them into folders and manage this potentially massive library of photos. Then kind of the next tab, because there's tabs going across the top here, the library allows you to organize. The develop module lets you go in and edit those. So that's when you're ready to edit. You can do your, you can lighten it, darken it, adjust contrast, adjust color. You can sharpen your photos. There's lots of different things you can do. And over the years, Lightroom has gotten very capable of doing things that I would not have thought it could have been able to do. Like, you could do selective adjustments. In the beginning versions of Lightroom, everything was just kind of done to the entire photo. But then we wanted the ability to be able to selectively go in and like, oh, this is kind of dark right there. Let me just go in and lighten that. That used to be stuff you'd have to go into Photoshop to do. But Lightroom has that ability. So you can actually do a lot of stuff. Now, what Lightroom doesn't do is it doesn't do the especially super creative things of like compositing photos together. Lightroom is kind of one photo at a time. And it's really good as far as a workflow goes, where you can, let's say, do a photo shoot where everything has, let's say, the same exposure and the same color balance. And if all of your photos are just like a little bit dark or a little bit light, they have the wrong color balance, you could just select all the photos, make the change, and it just changes all the photos all in one shot. So it's really meant for the photographer workflow of shoot your photos, edit, and thinking of it as like a photo shoot, not just one photo at a time. Anything that you need to do that's more creative, compositing, going in and running filters on certain areas, those things are going to require Photoshop. But there's a send over to Photoshop part that you can do, and you could take your photo from Lightroom, send it over to Photoshop, make your edits, come back, and it will update in Lightroom. So Lightroom is the place you organize and edit your photos. And anything it can't do, that's when you go to Photoshop. There is the companion app, and these things are going to sync your changes back to Lightroom Classic. So you can choose what you want to sync, and then the changes will sync back. So there's a ton of different apps that Creative Cloud includes, little something for everybody, depending on the industry that you're in. Those are the main apps. There are some additional ones too, like I mentioned Audition. I didn't have a slide for that one. But really, if you're in the creative industry, professionally speaking, whether you're a designer, a photographer, you're doing marketing, you're a videographer, professionals use the Adobe apps, and they use the Adobe Creative Cloud. As far as ways to learn, at Noble Desktop, we have multiple ways that you can learn. We have webinars or seminars, classes, certificate programs. We do free seminars like this one that we're doing right now, 1 to 2 hours, get you familiar with an app. We have some other webinars that you should check out already currently on our YouTube channel. And those are live demonstrations where you can actually see the app working, get an introduction to it so you can see how Photoshop works, how Illustrator works, how InDesign works, After Effects, and so forth. We have a lot of kind of getting started or intro webinars that you can check out. So check that out on our YouTube channel. We also have classes. So if you want to do like a 1 to 3 day class, or if it's at night, 1 to 3 weeks, if you're doing it on nights or weekends, those are live interactive classes where whether you're in person in New York City or live online, there's going to be a live instructor. You're seeing them demonstrate the software, going through practical examples, going through real life kind of exercises, learning the software to do the types of things you would normally want to do with that software. So that's a nice quick way to get into the software, and we can teach quite a lot of stuff in just the 1 to 3 days, so like 6 to 18 hours. You'd sometimes be surprised at how much you can learn in a short amount of time when it's well planned out. We've been teaching this stuff for a very long time, so we've figured out efficient ways to be teaching, and we don't teach this stuff that you don't need to be worried about. We just dive right into the important things that you need to learn for the software. Now, if you want to learn things more thoroughly, multiple apps, you want to get into a whole area of design, like you want to become a graphic designer or a web designer or a motion designer, video editor, then for that we have a bigger certificate program, which includes multiple courses. Those also typically include like a portfolio class where you can start to create your own projects in that class as well. So we have anything from 1 hour all the way up to longer certificate programs. As far as free seminars go, well, if you're watching this on YouTube already, you already are on our YouTube channel, but you can go check out our YouTube channel for a list of the full list of free seminars. We do try to list things out, and it's always a good idea to subscribe because you'll get notifications of when we go live, when we schedule upcoming live streams on here. So good idea to subscribe. But we do try to break these out also into some playlists like Creative Cloud. So here you can see getting started in motion graphics, video editing. I just did a live stream on Adobe XD, so you can check those out. So depending on what you're interested in, we try to break out different areas for you to learn. Like here's an intro to Photoshop that you can get started with, intro to Illustrator, and so on. So just check those out. You can also sign up for our e-news to get announcements. So we send out an email like once a week, and we announce things like free seminars and other things that are going on. So that link will take you to our website, and if you scroll down to the bottom, you can enter in your email, and we announce things, and you get useful information there and tips and tricks and stuff in our emails. As far as Creative Cloud classes go, here's a bunch of links to the various classes. It's not every single class that we teach, but just a variety of the different ones. So if you want to shortcut right to the class that you're interested in, these are going to be for the individual apps. So if you're just interested in Photoshop, these are our Photoshop classes, which you can also find up here. If you go like to design, you can see those. And if you're interested in more certificate programs, you can go up here to certificate programs, or if you go back to our slides, the last one is if you're interested in a full-on certificate program, you can check out these links right here. So if you want to get into graphic design, you want to get into visual design, which is web design, motion graphics, video editing, or just check out all the various design classes and certificates that we have. This is kind of a general link of all the design related stuff. Just as an example, let's say you're interested in graphic design. This is our graphic design certificate. And if you look at the curriculum that's in there, this is some student work here that you can check out, but you're going to learn InDesign, Photoshop, and Illustrator, kind of three of the most typical kind of design things kind of associated with traditional graphic design, and a graphic design portfolio. That's where you'll use the things that you've learned in those classes, learning the software, to start putting your portfolio together, doing things like a logo design and other actual design projects, learning about the theory of design, not just the apps. So sure, you can learn just the apps with us, but you can also learn the design concepts as well. This link, again, is in the video description down below here in the YouTube video, and you can use that to click through all of these links if you want to. There's also some links in the video description down below as well that also shortcut you over to our website. Keep in mind that any of our classes typically can be done live online. So if you're not in the New York City area, if you can't make it to our school located in New York City, we're just a block away from the Empire State Building, so it's centrally located. But if you can't make it, you can always attend our classes live online. We are based in New York City, so all of the times are based on Eastern time. So keep that in mind. But you can join live. You can just remote into the instructor's computer, see what they're showing, get the benefit of them teaching, and still get your hands-on classes. These webinars are just kind of lecture style, informational, but all of our classes are hands-on, practical, seeing the software, seeing how it works, and are great ways to learn this stuff in a quick way that enables you to get started with this stuff. So thank you so much, and hope to see you either in a class or in a future webinar. Thank you so much, and have a great day.